And so after my first round in Gaza, I decided to go back to New York. I went to these protests. I thought, hey, I'm an IDF soldier. I was just in Gaza. I can tell them what's going on. I can tell them what I saw. I can tell them the truth. People were so brainwashed. People had seen so much misinformation on social media. People saw me as a monster, as a baby killer, as a rapist. Call me whatever word you want. I've been called that before. It was hurtful for me to see that people just didn't want to listen. They didn't even want to hear me out. They didn't even want to let me speak and tell them not my opinion, but my truth, what I actually saw. And that only drove me to keep on trying harder.
He walked into a 7-year-old girl's bedroom in Gaza. Pink walls, toys on the floor, and on the other side, posters of terrorists with hearts drawn around them. That moment changed everything. He left his life in New York, his career, his startup, and went straight into war after October 7th. He's fought in Gaza. He's seen what's actually happening on the ground. And now he says the real war didn't end on October 7th. It moved online to social media, college campuses, and the global narrative. This is a conversation you are not hearing anywhere else. Leyb, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Take me back to that moment in Gaza. You walked into a child's room. What did you actually see, and what went through your mind at that point?
The thing they don't really teach you about war is that there are some situations that you can prepare for as much as you want, but you'll never really be prepared for them. When we're training, we're focusing on fighting terrorists, we're fighting Hamas terrorists, fighting Hezbollah terrorists, and we're looking for the threat. But while you're looking for that threat, sometimes you stumble upon these weird situations, such as the one you mentioned, where you go into a room of a little girl and you're asking yourself, what what is this little girl relevant to war? How is this little girl relevant to terrorism? And you're tasked with clearing the house, which means looking under the beds and in every single room. And while I'm doing this, I'm sort of asking myself, like, I'm not going to find anything in this room. I can see the small backpacks. I can see the small school books. Then you move the closet, and behind the closet, you see pictures of terrorists with love hearts on them. And you eventually find weapons in these rooms. And I'm not saying that these little 7, 8-year-old kids are terrorists, but this is what they're brought up to admire. When I was a kid, I always wanted to aspire to be a hockey player or someone successful in this business, depending on what age I was. But in Gaza, you can see time and time again that the youth, that the next generation is inspired to continue doing the work that the current terrorist group, that the current terrorist government is doing, which is just to annihilate Jews and destroy the state of Israel. So it was a weird moment, but it just strengthened my reasoning for being there and trying to finish Hamas.
Now, where were you on October 7th, and what made you decide that you're going back?
On October 7th, and for a year and a half before, I was in New York. I was running a startup. I had just finished business school at the University of Michigan, and it was Simchat Torah, the Jewish holiday, as we know. So I was at a Shabbat dinner. We were dancing with the Torah. I was walking back at about 1 a.m. when I started seeing these different videos of this music festival and other videos that seemed to be totally fabricated. It didn't seem real what was going on. And I immediately knew that I had to head back to Israel. There was going to be a war. I was lucky enough to get the first flight out from New York to Tel Aviv, which was on the end of Sabbath, Motzei Shabbat on Saturday night, because El Al doesn't fly on Shabbat. And I just knew that this was much bigger than a regular terrorist attack. We were all being called in one way or another, and I had to get back to my unit. So it was just a feeling of something's happening, get back to Israel.
Did you have any hesitation, or what did your family say when you told them that you want to go back?
At the beginning, when I called my dad up, really at the beginning, when everything kind of started to come out on social media and the regular media, my dad told me to wait a second because my dad's fought in wars before. He's lived in Israel for a long time. He said, "Let's wait until we see what actually happens." But once I realized a couple hours later this was much bigger than a terrorist attack, I booked a flight and no hesitation at all. I have two brothers who are also combat soldiers in the IDF. By the time I got to Israel, they were already on base. So there was this feeling of I need to do whatever I can to get back to base as soon as I possible and join my unit for the upcoming whatever it may be.
From what I heard, there were thousands of soldiers outside of Israel at the time who reported back, who quickly flew back to go. Is there any other country where the soldiers would do that for?
Yeah, I don't know. I can't say if there's any other country. I hope to say yes, but Israel is very special in that way. It's not only that people wanted to go back and serve, it's that even non-soldiers wanted to go back in Israel just to be here. We're the only country in the world I feel like where people rush back to when there's a war. I can tell you that it wasn't as easy for the soldiers to get back to Israel. It took, I think it was 4 or 5 days until the emergency flights for soldiers started to run back to Israel. I opened a WhatsApp group trying to help a couple friends get back to Israel. It ended up being over 500 people looking for any way to get back. And you should have seen some of the comments. It was people were saying, "I don't care to take a boat. I don't care to just get me back to Israel." It was really something amazing to see.
Wow. Now, like you said, you had a life in New York. You had a career, startup. What were you walking away from? I mean, you're going to put your life on pause. And why was that sacrifice worth it?
I moved to the US in 2020 to fulfill the American dream. I did my MBA at the University of Michigan. I worked at a corporate company. I interned at a corporate company. I went to launch a startup, and my future, what I thought for the next at least 5 or 10 years, was going to be in the US, and I was excited for it. And I had launched a startup with someone I went to school with. I was getting into the American mindset, American game, thinking about maybe a green card or something like that. And I walked away from that. Am I happy today? Definitely. I met, the love of my life, which I'm about to get married to. I started an amazing organization, which we'll speak later about. But I was walking to what I had spent so much time and money and resources on, but it wasn't even a question of is this the right decision? It was obvious that this was the right decision.
Now, what was your role in the Army? What were you doing on a day to day basis?
Every day is different. I don't think that there was one day that was the same. And in reserve duty, your roles are a bit different than when you are in active duty. So, as we know, when you're 18, age 18 to 21, you're in active duty, you receive different roles. You're commander, you're this type of person. Once you get to reserve, it's a bit different. I, I'm what they call a negativist. So, it's someone who is responsible for holding the big machine gun. On each team you have different responsibilities. You have sharpshooters, you have medics, you have radio men, you have people who are responsible for holding this type of weapon and that type of weapon. And there's one guy or two guys who hold the big machine guns. And the idea is that when you're facing terrorists, you will not only try to hit the terrorists, but more so you make a lot of noise because you're shooting on automatic. So a lot of bullets are coming out, and you want your fire to push the terrorist's head down so they are scared to get up, which will give you an advantage of being on the field. So that's been my responsibility ever since I was 18. As you get older, a lot of people give it up because it causes a lot of back pain, which I can definitely feel, but I don't see myself giving it up anytime soon.
Wow. What does urban warfare actually look like on a day to day basis? And what's
Yeah.
something that people watching would don't understand?
Yeah, I think it's a lot more complicated than people think. We see a lot of movies where the soldiers are perfectly going to a house and they might face a terrorist or two and it goes really smoothly. But it's a lot more complicated than that. You have to prepare as much as you can with whatever resources you have. And when you don't have resources, you got to remember what you did in active duty. Remember all of the different I don't want to call them rules, but the different procedures you have to do, and you have to move slowly. And in a place like Gaza, there are civilians kind of interlaced with the terrorists, or I can say it the other way around because that's how Hamas fights. They dress up in civilian clothes and kind of blend themselves in with terrorism. So you have to be very careful. In Gaza, there's a lot of when we for my entire life when I've been preparing for war. It's in preparing to fight armies, preparing to fight outside in the fields, preparing to fight on army bases. But in Gaza, for a couple of weeks we were in Israel before we went in, we were training how to fight in schools, how to fight in playgrounds, how to fight in very public buildings. And it's something that I never prepared for. So there's a lot of different obstacles that you have to face, and you have to use your mind and use your brain to do what you think is right, following the morals and the ethics and the very high standard that the IDF makes you follow. And remember your mission, which our mission was not in any order, but number one, to get back the hostages, and number two, to eliminate Hamas. Actually, I think for me personally, the hostages were more important than eliminating Hamas, but those were our two missions when we were in Gaza.
From what I heard, one of Hamas's tactics was to, hide behind children. They would send children towards the soldiers, or they would send, old women or something like that, and they would hide behind them. Is that did you encounter these tactics on the battlefield?
This is something that they haven't been doing since October 7th, but much before. I was mostly in areas where it was generally terrorists, not civilians. But however, there were a few times where we saw terrorists not dressed up in any sort of Hamas uniform, but clear terrorists hiding behind women and physically hiding behind them, putting the woman in front of them because they know that we wouldn't shoot against towards any women. And you just see the cowardness. Like I think I'll never respect any member of Hamas, but I think I would respect someone a lot more if they stood on their beliefs and fought the IDF by themselves instead of hiding behind someone else, especially a woman or a child.
Now, what would you say to, the media and people out there that say that, the IDF is not a moral army, they could be fighting in Gaza better, and all these different claims? You being there, uh, how, how wrong is that?
Yeah. It's very easy to judge from the outside. No one who hasn't been in Gaza knows how complicated it is and how crazy the situations are that we have to face. I want to start off by prefacing with the fact there's no war where innocent civilians don't die. They will always die. There's always going to be civilian casualties in every single war in the past and in every single war in the future. It's just part of war. But the measures that we take to prevent civilian deaths, the times where different raids or different attacks have been called off because not because there was a civilian there, but because there was a potential for a civilian to be there, um, is is numerous. The People always say it could be much better. Of course, it could be better. It can always be better, but it could have been much worse. And I'm not saying a little bit worse. It could have been a lot worse. I feel like if Israel didn't care, if Israel was maybe the US Army or a different army that didn't take as many chances, didn't put their soldiers in danger, we could have flattened Gaza on day one. We could have said, look, we know that a lot of soldiers are about to die, a lot of IDF soldiers. Yes, we do have hostages and it's very, very sad. Why don't we just flatten all of Gaza, not take the risk of having more soldiers dying, and we'll be fine. But of course, the IDF wouldn't do that because number one, we value human life. So each life of a hostage is a Jewish life, or even not a Jewish life, a human life. Sorry. Um, Overall, if you look at the number of soldiers who died versus the number of hostages that were taken, the number of soldiers is more. I think by about times four. And the 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 times where we have to ask for permission to do certain things, the times where we really have to think twice and three times and four times about what we do happens every single day. No IDF soldier wants to go to war. No IDF soldier really likes putting themselves in danger. We don't have conversations where, oh, that was such a fun raid, or that was such a fun, house to demolish because there was a terrorist in there. No, we have a very specific mission, and that is just to defend the state of Israel. And if someone comes knocking on our door and is a threat to us, we will neutralize that threat, just like any other person in the world would.
I can imagine that it would be very hard to fight when, at any moment the hostage, you could run into a hostage, or, also you don't want to kill innocent civilians. So you got a few different things going on, while Hamas is, they don't care about anything.
Yeah, the hostages, we would collect more information about them. Our unit didn't specifically deal with them, but of course you're always looking for them. There was an incident, if you remember, where hostages ran free and the IDF accidentally shot at them, which was a horrible incident. But the parents of the hostages who were shot, I don't know if they fully understood, but they said they understood. Um, Fighting terrorism when they are interlaced with civilians is very hard, because sometimes you see the terrorists in front of your eyes, but they're surrounded by civilians, and as an IDF soldier, you know that you're not going to shoot them because there's a chance that a civilian might get hurt. There's another thing that you didn't mention that isn't really spoken about, but it's also friendly fire. About 20% of IDF soldier deaths came from friendly fire. And again, just like civilian casualties are a part of war, so is this. And when one out of every five soldiers around was killed because of a mistake we made, because we were being too careful or we didn't notice something, it's very, very sad. It's something that we face, and it still happens today. When a
Yeah.
soldier gets injured because of friendly fire, it's one thing, but when a soldier gets killed, it's another thing.
And, I was also speaking to an IDF soldier before, and he was part of the group that, you remember when the 21 soldiers died in that booby trapped house. Yeah, he was
Yeah, of
part of that unit.
course.
And you kind of think like that if there was any other army, they wouldn't have to go into a house. They would just level the house, right? But we go into the house and
Yeah, yeah.
lose soldiers in that way as well.
You go into the house, you make the extra effort. You have terrorists that the IDF have been looking for a very long time. And because there are civilians in the area, those missions are called off. Like you say, this terrorist is responsible for killing a ton of Israelis, tens, hundreds, whatever it may be. And you have the opportunity to remove him as a threat. A civilian or two might die, it'll be fine. But no, we don't think that way. We say a civilian or two might die, it's not going to be fine. Let's call him off. We'll find him in another time. And it's so easy to be a terrorist when you're just hiding in between civilians because you're creating a shield for yourself. They know that the IDF won't play that dirty game that Hamas does. I will never hide behind a civilian. I will never fight out of a school if I don't have to. I will never put myself in a situation that Hamas does, because civilians should not be involved in war. And I really wish the world knew the measures, the lengths we go to prevent as many civilian casualties and to ensure that we are doing the right thing when it comes to war, which is a very, very complicated thing to do.
Yeah. It seemed like the only time Hamas was wearing their uniforms was at the hostage parade ceremonies. Besides for that, they fought in civilian clothing, which is unbelievable. Now, did you have anything to do with the tunnel system? Did you get to see the tunnel system at all?
Definitely saw tunnels, uncovered tunnels, called units to blow up tunnels, but I never went inside a tunnel. That's not part of my unit's responsibility. However, I have a friend in a unit called the which is the special forces of the engineering unit, and he has crazy stories. Just the other day he came out of Gaza and they were looking in a tunnel. He just found sniper weapons there. I guess the terrorists knew they were coming, so they ran away. But you find all kinds of things in these tunnels. People are living, terrorists are living in these tunnels. Also, hostages did. But you just they're like rats. They're in these tunnels waiting for the perfect moment. And there were many situations where they would just come out of a tunnel, shoot, try and kill a couple IDF soldiers, and go back down. And because the tunnel system is so complex and so sophisticated, they're able to get from one side of the city to the other side of the city very quickly.
Now, I believe Israel knew that Hamas had tunnels for a while. I guess they didn't realize to what extent, right? Like how many tunnels they had, and I think that they're still uncovering tunnels, right? And it's
Yeah, the tunnels is not a new thing. We know that the Hamas has been taking the concrete that's meant to build schools and meant to build hospitals and using it to build underground tunnels specifically to attack Israel. And it felt like every time we would uncover one tunnel, then three more would be found. Or every time the engineering unit would blow up two tunnels, four more would be found. So it seems like it's never ending. I can almost guarantee you that ever since Israel or the IDF stopped its ground operation in Gaza, Hamas has been rebuilding those same tunnels or maybe different tunnels because they know that it's a tactic that works. I have to say it's pretty genius. Like digging tunnels underground and just being able to be so protected because it's very hard to find those tunnels from above ground. Hamas is not a stupid terrorist group. They know exactly what they're doing, but it's a threat that we face every single day.
I heard a stat that the amount of construction material that went into Gaza, they would have been able to build, I think, like seven Burj Khalifas, like seven of those huge skyscrapers in Dubai. So it's absolutely incredible, what they used it for instead.
Yeah.
Um, do you
And a lot of people are saying like that they did use the concrete meant for hospitals to build hospitals because clearly there were so many hospitals destroyed by the IDF. But when the IDF looked at the tunnels and looked at the composition between the percentage of the concrete, like how much of I'm not an expert on this, but you can see what percent concrete it is. They took that and they looked at the all the concrete that came from different places in the world, like all the different states, and they saw that those that concrete was meant for buildings, not for tunnels. So it was clear that they used it for tunnels, and I'm not surprised by the stat.
Yeah. Now, you once mentioned the moment that you were, I think, playing cards and then you heard an explosion.
Hmm.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah, of course.
Can you
Yeah. At the beginning of the war in November, it was a Friday afternoon, and e- every Friday afternoon in my normal life, I start preparing for Shabbat. Well, it's Friday morning usually, but I'm making food and I'm inviting guests, and you get into that Shabbat feeling. And even when we were in Gaza, we still had that feeling. It was kind of weird because we weren't out celebrating Shabbat with our families, with our loved ones, but you still, this is something that you've been doing every day for your entire life. And we heard it wasn't an explosion. We just heard on the radio that there is, it's called, in English, it's basically an incident with many casualties. And this is something that you prepare for. When there's an incident or an event with several casualties, it means that Hamas has really struck big and that you have people who are going to be injured and they're going to be screaming. Your job, your responsibility is to understand who is hurt the most, who can be taken back to Israel, put on a helicopter and back to the hospital the quickest, and to really prioritize, it's weird to say, but prioritize the injuries and understand who didn't make it. So when we're practicing for these events in theory, we it's a lot of noise because one person, his leg got cut off, so he's screaming, "Ah, my leg." One person's arm got chopped off, "Ah, my arm." And that adds to the pressure of trying to prioritize which people need to receive medical attention first. Anyways, back to Gaza. We hear on the radio that there is this event with several casualties, and we're already trained. We know what to expect. And about 50 meters from us, we run and we go and see that Hamas has used a camera to identify IDF soldiers, and they remotely detonated it, uh, injuring and killing several people. It was a group of 10 people. Four of them unfortunately died. Six of them were super injured. When we got to this place, we expected to see people screaming and yelling and asking for help, but it was all silent. And I was asking myself, are we in the wrong place? Is this right? And I realized that it was silent because every person on that 10-man team was either dead or so injured that they couldn't even speak. And we loaded them onto the ones who were alive. We loaded them onto the jeeps to get them in a helicopter as quickly as possible. You had one person with his leg was blown off, two legs are blown off, one person whose arm was blown off, one person whose face was so screwed up that you didn't even know who he was, but you know that he's on your team. Unfortunately, one of the people who died was the son of Ambassador Leiter, who's the current ambassador, um, and the Israeli ambassador to the U.S. And yeah, it was just a weird feeling. Like we finished that entire, you know, getting the soldiers out and looking for Hamas. That we finished. It started about 4 p.m. and we finished everything at about 11 p.m. And you remember it's Shabbat, and on Shabbat you do kiddush, and you make the blessing for the wine and for the bread. And no one wanted to do it because we just saw some of our unit members died. And I remember taking the Kiddush cup and telling everyone, let's use their injuries and their deaths as our strength to keep on fighting. Because if we are going to be down, and if we're going to be, you know, in shock, then Hamas is just going to do this again and again and again. And it was a very weird Kiddush. I remember doing it in the absolute darkness. No one was saying anything. Um, we just took a sip. We ate a little bit. I don't even know if we ate. And our officer came to speak to us again, complete darkness, and you could hear the pain. Didn't just feel the pain, you really heard it. And you know, it became sort of it wasn't a one-time thing, unfortunately. It happened a couple times. The next Friday we also had an RPG that was fired at our building, which is very scary, especially if you're not used to it. It's never happened to you before. And other stories like that, which make you realize that you're really at war with people who actually want to kill you.
Are there any other stories that stood out in your mind, from your time in Gaza?
Yeah, there's many stories. We can go on forever, but one thing I'll mention is we worked a lot with the tank unit. We would kind of we would go and then they would go and then we would go and we would each sort of cover for ourselves. And I remember we had this, it was a Sunday, we had one last mission to do, and it was classic, take over another house, shoot at some terrorists. It became very normal. And after that mission, we were all supposed to go home. So we conducted the mission, thinking that in 2 hours we'll be on our way out. And unfortunately, Hamas attacked one of the tanks that we were working with. Two out of the four crew members, they were unfortunately killed. And instead of going home the next day, the families and the friends and also us as well, were attending their funeral the next day. So it's very surreal when you're okay, let's just do one more mission, let's just do one more thing, we'll be home, we'll see my wife, my kids, my parents, my friends, and then a second later you're at Har Herzl and you're watching the brother of the soldier trying to say something, but it's in such shock that just 24 hours ago that his brother was alive and now he's burying him. So a lot of unfortunate stories that happened to us and to basically everyone who served in Gaza. But we thank God, the hostages did end up coming home, the ones that were alive, and we got as much as we could.
Now, how did you stay mentally strong in Gaza when you're seeing friends dying, people's hands and legs being blown off? I mean, these are not things that we see on a normal basis. How do you stay strong, when you see those things?
It's definitely a different reality, one that you're not used to, one that you've been preparing for years. I've been in the reserve since 2012. It's happened over 10 years of me training in addition to the active duty training that I had. So it's very weird. I think that one of the things I did when I went into Gaza, each time I went in and out, was I just did a mental shut off. I didn't think about my friends. I didn't think about my family. I didn't think about my job. I knew that I had two missions, and that was to bring the hostages home and to eliminate Hamas. And when you block everything out and you focus on those two missions, you know exactly why you're there, what your purpose is in Gaza, what will motivate you when that is to complete the mission. And you're also there for your friends. You look to the left of you and to the right of you. And in addition to those two missions, hostages and Hamas, you're also there to support your friends and be there for each other and protect each other. So I didn't think that we had too much time to think in Gaza, especially at the beginning. You were just go, go, go. And you knew exactly what you had to do. You knew exactly what you trained for. And you knew exactly why you were there. So I think I also had an additional motivation, which was to show the world what was going on in Gaza as much as I could. I would take a digital camera or a GoPro and just film whatever was safe to put out and to show what war was like, to show what we do when we run into animals, to show what happens when there's this type of situation or that type of situation. So that gave me an additional motivation to keep on fighting and to get the truth out. Is the truth out today? Fortunately not, because we have 15 times the number of people on social media who are trying to spread misinformation and straight up things that are very untrue. But I try to do what I can.
Yeah, I remember your posts from back then, that you would put on Instagram. How did you, come up with that idea to do that? How did you get that motivation to do that?
Uh,
Not everyone does.
no, no, most people don't, and for the most part, you're not supposed to do it. But on October 7th, when I was waiting for my flight in New York to Israel, I just made a video. I've made videos before, I've been successful, but I've never been someone who just makes videos on Instagram. And that video was just me talking to the camera, just about how I'm feeling. I'm a tech founder going to war. I'm the third brother who has to say goodbye to my parents because he's going to combat. And it kind of just got more views than usual. and I just kept on posting about my journey, going to the army, saying bye to my grandfather, and being in the army, people were so interested. It started out mostly Jews, and then it became non-Jews as well, and I would get messages, and it was really taking off. So I was posting for a couple of weeks, and then uh, someone, these two girls approached me, Rachel and Elaine, who also are pretty involved in or were involved in advocacies, still are, but in different ways. And we just talked, and I said, "Listen, I'm going into Gaza. I'm going to have no phone. I'm going to have a lot of footage when I come back. I need you to run my Instagram for me." And it was this sort of cycle where I would come home from a 2-week, 3-week stint in Gaza. I would take all my footage, I would organize it, and I would put the different captions and hand it off to them. They would fix everything because they were social media pros, and they would post on my behalf while I was in Gaza when I went back to Gaza. And it was this sort of partnership where they did it for absolutely free out of the goodness of their heart. They were handling everything on social media, and they really helped me grow my platform to someone who had a voice on what was going on in Gaza.
Yeah, I feel like after October 7th, there was such a need to support your country. People want to support their soldiers. They want to see what's going on. They want to be involved. That's also kind of when this channel took off as well. So
Yeah.
I completely understand. What you're saying. Was there any point in time where you were afraid that you might not make it out of Gaza?
I think there's always a risk. There's definitely certain situations where you're more, can't even say scared than others. There's other situations that are more dangerous than others. But I always knew I would come home. Our officers, some officers would tell their soldiers to write letters to their families if God forbid something happens. But our officer told us, if you're in that mindset, you're opening the door to the opportunity that it might happen. If you are sure that you're going to do something and you will do it in the right way and you'll be careful, then there's no reason not to come back home. And there's also a difference. I have to say that the active duty soldiers, the ones who are 18 to 21 years old, they were in the thick of things. They were in the most dangerous places because that's their job. They're soldiers and they belong to the army, and they are much more trained than we are. But when it comes to reservists who are 25, 30, 40, 50, 60 years old, you really think twice and even three times before doing something. As an 18-year-old soldier, if I'm told to go into Gaza, knock on the door, and look for terrorists and shoot, I will do it. But because I, as a 34-year-old right now, have much more life experience, and I don't want to say much more to lose because I believe that all of us are equal. But I've gained, because of my age, I've gained more than them, which could mean a wife, which could mean kids, which could mean job, which could mean other things, and you're really careful. So luckily we had officers, or one officer specific who was responsible. He was our company commander, who didn't just rush into things. He took his time. He was very careful. He ensured that wherever we were going, even if it was a very dangerous situation, he did it as safely as possible. And in our specific company, in the smaller unit, everyone came back home, at least physically okay. So I was very grateful for that. But then again, the second you cross into Gaza, you're taking a risk. It's a threat.
Um,
Yeah.
I'm sure that when you go into Gaza, right, you're silencing the noise from the outside. But when you come back out of Gaza, you're hearing the noise from the media, the international media. You're hearing the noise from the media in Israel, which we know can be a lot of noise they make. You have the internal struggle of the country. You have those who are telling Bibi to stop. What are you doing? We need the hostages. There's a whole hostage square. There was a lot going on then.
Mhm.
What did you feel like when you heard this noise? What did it do to you, and how were you feeling at that time?
The, the let's start off with the mind switch that you have to make. You know, the mind switch that you have to make from going from Gaza, where you're fighting every single day, physically fighting. You're not eating well. You're not drinking well. You're not sleeping well. Your mind is in a different place. Coming back to a place, especially where I live in Tel Aviv, where at one point in the war just became the new normal, and people were sitting at cafes. And I don't expect anyone to treat me differently, to treat me more special because I'm a soldier. I serve my country because I want to serve my country, and I'm proud to serve my country. But at one point, people were talking and complaining about things that seemed so irrelevant to me. In my head, I'm like, we're in the middle of a war. What are you talking about? Why are you arguing about this and that? And I would hear these conversations of people saying things, and it's, you know, people outside of Israel, not everyone understands, but also in Israel, not everyone understood. And to me, the fights about left and right and Bibi and not Bibi seem so irrelevant at this point. I have to say that at the beginning of the war, it did feel like everyone was together, was one. I didn't hear anything about politics. I didn't hear. We all were so hurt and so traumatized about what had happened on October 7th that we became one big family. But with time, things changed and people went back to their opinions and their thoughts. And it was very hurtful to see 'cause that's exactly what happened before October 7th. And I'll be honest, when I would come home for a day or two, I would also block that out. It was important for me to see my family and to see my friends and to mentally try and reset before going in again, knowing that I'm not only I am putting myself in danger. That's an obvious. Every IDF soldier puts themselves in danger. But the burden that my family took on and all the other families of IDF soldiers, for us, it wasn't just one IDF soldier in Gaza. It was three IDF soldiers in very dangerous situations. So I just tried to rest in whatever way I could. And I really blocked out a lot of what was happening in Israel during those intense periods.
Now, you said that the war didn't end on October 7th, it moved online. What did you mean by that? October 8th, right? You see protests around the world. What were you thinking at that point in time?
Yeah, so after my first round in Gaza, I decided to go back to New York and I went to these protests. I thought, hey, I'm an IDF soldier. I was just in Gaza. I can tell them what's going on. I can tell them what I saw. I can tell them the truth. But I was speaking to, for the most part, I was speaking to a wall because people were so brainwashed. People had seen so much misinformation on social media. People saw me as a monster, as a baby killer, as a rapist. Call me whatever word you want. I've been called that before, as an occupier. And it was really hard for me. Not that people were brainwashed. Like, fine, social media will do that. It's something that has been going on for years, whether it's the mainstream media, whether it's off, whatever type of media it is, or whatever type of person it is. It was hurtful for me to see that people just didn't want to listen. They didn't even want to hear me out. They didn't even want to let me speak and tell them not my opinion, but my truth, what I actually saw. And that only drove me to keep on trying harder. When you're one on one, it's fine. When you're one on two, it's fine. But when you're going to these protests where it's loud and you have thousands of Palestinians, whether it's in Times Square, I went to Washington D.C. when Bibi went to speak. When you had over, I think it was 10,000 Palestinians outside of in D.C. I'm walking around with an Israeli flag. I'm walking around with a shirt that says I'm an IDF soldier. Ask me a question, but it's people don't want to listen to you, and it's hard to not be able to tell them what you want to tell them because you're just what you said is what Noi experienced becomes irrelevant, and it's sad.
I think nowadays you look at the right. I mean, we always had the left against Israel. But nowadays, we see the right, we see the Tucker Carlsons, all these other right wing pundits that are coming out speaking out against Israel. Um, does that concern you? And what do you think we could be doing better? Is there anything we could be doing better in the PR?
Yeah.
What do you think we could be doing better? Or it is what it is. They have their own agendas. Some of them could be getting paid. How we're going to battle that?
To answer your question, definitely, it's definitely a worry. I think that my biggest worry isn't that it's not that they're doing what they're doing, but the amount of influence they have because of social media, their reach, especially to the Gen Zs, which is the new generation, is going to switch us in politics and in office and wherever it may be. That very much worries me. What could we do better? I wish I had the answer. Maybe we need our own Tucker Carlsons to go out and speak the truth. We need more Charlie Kirks, who he would also criticize Israel, but he also saw the bigger picture. I really wish that instead of birthright funding Jews coming to Israel, they could also fund non-Jews to come to Israel. Every person, for the most part, who's been to Israel may not be the biggest advocate, but they also know that what's the other side is saying is an extreme. I feel like most Jews are very good at what they do, whether it's in their job or we're very successful people, but we're also quiet. A lot of us are quiet. A lot of us don't want to stir the pot. A lot of us want to go in and excel at that job because we will excel. That's who we are, and that's who we always will be because of not just our identity, but all of the previous sufferings we've had. We are in survival mode all the time. But you look around and you see the pro-Palestinian side who are happy to wear huge Palestinian flags and backpacks and stickers and put on their Instagram a Palestinian flag. And a lot of the Jews are worried, and I get it. It's a scary world. It's not safe to be a Jew everywhere in this world. And while I know I will always be proud of who I am, and I'm also a man. I've served in the IDF. I'm used to dealing with these threats. Um, but I feel like we need to be more proud. We need to be more out there, in your face kind of Jews. Again, not to start any provocation, but I want people to really inside of themselves look and feel like we are the Jews. We've survived. I also want to say that the other side, especially the Arabs, they respect strength, even if they disagree with you, even if they think that you're a baby killer. When you show strength, and that's, again, I'm not saying physical strength also, but when you show pride and strength, they respect that, even if they disagree with it. And kind of just going on with their daily lives as if nothing happened. I think it's only weakening us. And I don't even know if we have to do advocacy. Like, there's no other country in the world that does Jewish advocacy. No one else does Hasbara, as we call it. Why do we put so much effort in explaining ourselves when no one's even listening to us? I don't know. But there's a lot of questions that have to be answered, and I'm doing what I can. Today, I run an organization with two other people named Max Long and Liz Becker called Strong Voices for Israel. I realized that many of the Jewish organizations are speaking to an echo chamber, are speaking to the Jewish community, which is great because we need to strengthen ourselves. It's very important. But the majority of the world, the ones who dictate what the world thinks about Jews, are non-Jews. So we started Strong Voices for Israel to go and speak to those non-Jewish communities, whether it's at churches, whether it's at Christian universities, Christian schools, to bring them frontline stories of people like myself, Nova survivors, October 7th survivors, even second generation Holocaust survivors, to be able to go and tell their story to people who need to hear it. And not everyone always agrees with us, but that's okay. If I or any of my speakers has the opportunity to go to a non-Jewish community who's probably been blasted with pro-Palestinian, anti-Zionist media, but has never heard a Jew, leave Israeli, a Jew speak, then I'm going to do that. And that's why I'm proud of running Strong Voices for Israel today with my two other co-founders. I really think we need to put an effort on speaking to the non-Jewish world more.
I wanted to ask you, before October 7th, did you believe that peace was actually possible with the Palestinians? And after everything you've seen, do you still believe that it's possible?
Before October 7th, I definitely thought they were way more peaceful in terms of numbers, peaceful Palestinians who wanted this. Again, I didn't grow up in Israel, so I have a bit of a different outlook on this. You speak to Israelis, and some of them feel that not much has changed. They just showed their true faces. But I really did think that there was a potential to peace because I assumed that just like Noah in Israel wants to live his life, be with his fiance, go to work, live your life, go to restaurants, have a beer. I really felt like in Gaza there was many people who were the same. After being in there, seeing what the new generations are being brought up on, what they're being taught, what they're being fed, seeing what the current or older generations are thinking, what books they read, what huge Hamas flags they have in their homes, what terrorists they worship. Uh, I don't want to say peace isn't possible because I'm an optimist and I really feel like it is possible. But for that to happen, we need to, number one, we need to take Hamas out of the picture. You can't have peace. You can't make peace with a terrorist. So if the terrorist organization is in charge, definitely not. I feel like the education needs to be worked on because everyone is brainwashed there. Brainwashed to hate Israel, to kill Israel, because 1948 and the Nakba and before, and they don't talk about all the attempts at peace that we've gone to. They just talk about all the bad things. So they need to be, I don't want to say re-educated because sometimes you can't re-educate people, but the newer generations need to be educated in a proper manner, in a peaceful manner, and maybe in 2 or 3 generations we will have peace. But as long as Hamas is in power, as long as there's that hatred towards Israel, whether it's in the Hamas charter or not, the chance at true peace where I can walk along the Gaza border and not feel like a threat, I think it's very far from us, unfortunately.
Do you think that people misunderstand Hamas, like not politically, but ideologically? It's kind of similar to what's going on in Iran right now. You have the Islamic regime, which took their people hostage, and they also have this ideology that I think people don't talk about enough. You know, it's this religious ideology that how are you ever going to make peace with that? You know, when it's their calling from God, so to speak, Allah, to do what they
Mhm.
do, right? How is it possible to make peace with these type of people?
It's a great question. Just like in Iran, in Gaza, you do have many of the citizens who do support the regime, who do support Hamas. You do have people who are happy to fight and happy to support and happy to push because that's what they've been taught for their entire lives. As a Westerner, as someone who has Western values, as someone who doesn't want to destroy someone, even if I disagree with them, like after all I've gone through, I still don't want to destroy the Palestinian people because they are Palestinian. I disagree with many things that they do, but it's not my job to decide if they live or not. But how do you deal with these people? I don't know. And why do people misunderstand them? Because people see them as what they're told to see them, as these brave freedom fighters who are just defending themselves, and they hide behind civilians because they have no other choice. And they crossed into Israel on October 7th and killed over 1,200 innocent Israeli civilians because they were just fed up with being in an open air prison and all these different, you know, these different irrelevant arguments and these different, I don't want to swear, but these really bad arguments, um, these false arguments and these fake arguments that they're just fed and fed and fed. So what the word resistance is a very, I think it's a positive thing. When you stand up and resist what society is doing because you're in such a horrible situation, I as Noy, I admire that person. Good for you for standing up and for not taking, not just doing what you're told. And the world has created these amazing slogans, these catching slogans, these words, these strong words: resistance, apartheid, occupation, um, that really help people who don't know anything about the conflict. It really helps them align with the conflict and align with their values. And within, minutes of being told or reading a couple things, you have this, American or Canadian or European who all of a sudden supports the resistance, that all they want to do is be free and live their life. They don't know what their true motives behind it are, which is sad.
Yeah. No, I want to thank you for your time. Really appreciate you sharing your story and your enlightening us with what's going on in Gaza and Israel. Where could people find you? Where could people learn more about your organization? And if you want to leave us with a final message, something that we didn't touch on yet, uh, floor is yours.
Sure. So my organization, the Instagram or the website, it's Strong Voices for Israel or strongvoicesforisrael.org. If you are any community, especially a non-Jewish community, but also Jewish communities, we're happy to come and bring amazing stories that aren't told in other places, ones that we don't record, that leave audiences in shock. My personal Instagram, where I will continue on posting army content, which I'm actually going this Thursday. I'm going to Lebanon for 3 months. So a lot of upcoming content. You can that's my name at Leyb, Noyleyb. And for a final message, whether you're a Jew or whether you're a non-Jew, if you are a human being and you're listening to this podcast and you've arrived at this point, first of all, good for you. But it's important to stand up for what's right and for the truth. I don't want to say that Israel is a perfect country. The IDF isn't a perfect army. Things have happened and we take responsibility for them. But for the most part, and I don't like to compare, but when you do compare, the IDF is one of the most, if not the most moral and ethical army in the world. We keep ourselves to the highest standards. When something bad happens, when a shot was fired that it didn't need to be fired, when an IDF soldier destroys a cross in Lebanon, we take responsibility for that. One bad apple doesn't represent the entire organization. So always look into things once or twice or three times or four times before you make a decision, and know that us people in Israel are proud to fight for our country. We will keep on doing so. And if you align with Western values and what I believe is truthful values, then you're outside of Israel, I really hope that you keep on supporting us and spreading the truth, because we want this war to end. We want peace. It's just the other side that doesn't really want it.
Thank you, Noy. May you stay safe in Lebanon and hope to speak to you again when you get back. All the
Amen.
best.
Amen. Thanks for having me. Of course.
If you have a 401k or an IRA, please listen. Gold is at record highs. What many people don't know is this: you can move part of your retirement money legally and without tax penalties into physical gold you actually own. Alpha Omega Gold helps you do this through a gold IRA. Your gold is real, it is stored safely, it is in your name. Learn more at ao.gold/stand. Alpha Omega Gold is our sponsor, and they proudly stand with Israel.